Hey, what's going on, Black people? I hope you guys are having a good day. I'm gonna give you guys time to come into the chat. I am really excited about this conversation. Very excited, actually. This is going to be a great, informative discussion. I want to first of all welcome everybody. Welcome to Dr. Boyce TV. This is the home for intelligent Black people. So if you're not Black and intelligent, you probably want to leave. I'm gonna try not to cuss today because I got a special guest today, and I'm gonna try to.
Thank you, brother.
Try to act like I got home training. But everybody, please, when you come in, as you come in, make sure you hit the thumbs up button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button. Welcome to everybody also on the African History Network. I think you guys are going to enjoy this conversation. You won't see the guests, but you'll be able to hear the guests. If you'd like to see the guests, just go to drboycetv.com. That's drboycetv.com, and you can see the guests. Today's special guest is Professor Anthony Browder. Professor Browder is one of the most respected historians and Egyptologists around the world. I'm going to read a little bit of his bio to you. He's an author, publisher, cultural historian, educational consultant. He is the founder and director of IKG Cultural Resources. He's devoted 35 years to researching ancient Egyptian history, science, philosophy, and culture. He's traveled to Egypt 52 times since 1980, and I bet that number's higher than 52 because I know he's going this week. And he's actually the first African American to fund and coordinate an archaeological dig in Egypt. He's led 20 archaeological missions to Egypt since 2009, and also he and his daughter Atlantis, right? It's Atlantis, right? Is that your daughter's name?
Oh yeah. You taught her when she was at Hampton, brother.
You kidding me? I taught your daughter.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
That's pretty good. I didn't know that, but yeah. So he and Dr. Browder and his daughter. It's a beautiful legacy thing as well. For those of you who have kids, you'll love this. They actually do excavations together, and they work together, and they don't just work to get a paycheck or for a job. They work because this is actually knowledge and information that most of us don't have about ourselves. That helps our community. So I hope you guys will take a second and give a digital round of applause to Professor Browder. So without further ado, my brother, how are you today?
I'm excellent, man. I'm really pleased to be on your show today and to interact with you and to talk about whatever it is you have in mind to discuss with you and your followers. I'm honored.
Well, I'd like to start and dive right into it. You and I met, and I'll tell the story, quickly. You and I met actually on a flight back from Guyana, and we've known of each other, but we actually met in person for the first time on a 5 a.m. flight to Guyana. The day was already interesting because Guyana it's not a big country. It's not a place where most of us don't know a lot of people who fly to Guyana. At least I don't. And so I don't expect at 5 a.m. to bump into anybody that I know if I'm getting on a 5 a.m. flight to Guyana. But first I bumped into Nuri Muhammad from the Nation of Islam, who's a wonderful guy, a good brother. I respect him a lot. And that right there was kind of strange. And then on the flight, I saw you, and you and I were talking. And then I started getting nervous. I said, this is not this is a weird dream or something. What's going on? And so that's how you and I got a chance to talk, and we covered a lot of interesting issues. I remember specifically, and I'll just kind of start with this. When you talk about activism in the community, there's a whole conversation now about Black identity extremists and the way they're sort of seen by the federal government. You and I actually had a conversation about, methods used by the government to undermine Black activism and Black progress in the past. COINTELPRO operations where, maybe people are planted in the community, create chaos, cause confusion. I'd like to start there. I know that this is not exact. I'd love to get into your realm as an Egyptologist and everything else, but that COINTELPRO conversation really stuck with me. And I'd love for you, based on your experience in this thing for such a long time, to kind of speak to that in terms of how younger people can learn, from what you know.
Sure. Just to clarify a couple of points, we met on the flight back from Guyana. So we were leaving Guyana, coming back to the States. Yes. And I've been traveling to Guyana. I've been to Guyana maybe 7 times since 2012. I did a study tour to Egypt in 2012 and had 6 people on that study tour who were from Guyana. A number of them had attended Howard University. And so they came together, did the study tour, and as a result of that study tour, we were friends for life. and a number of them are working in the Guyanese government, and they brought me over several times to do presentations. So just to put Guyana into a larger historical and cultural context, Guyana is the home of Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. Van Sertima wrote They Came Before Columbus. I met him February 21st, 1977. Ivan Van Sertima was the first black person, the first person I ever met who told me that the ancient Egyptians were black and not white. Everything that I had learned prior to 1977 had reinforced the lie that the Egyptians, ancient Egyptians, were white people. Guyana is also the home of George G.M. James, who wrote Stolen Legacy. George G.M. James was born in Georgetown, Guyana, taught at what is now University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. He wrote Stolen Legacy in 1954, and he was murdered in 1955. Dr. Ben tells a story that George G.M. James was murdered in a ritualistic Masonic murder. His throat was cut from ear to ear, his tongue was cut out, he was disemboweled, and his intestines were thrown to the west. This is a ritualistic Masonic murder for revealing certain secret information. So that book, Stolen Legacy, was out of print from 1955 until 1977, when Asa Hilliard, who was teaching at San Francisco State, had a copy of that book, gave a copy of Julian Richardson of Marcus Bookstore, who reprinted that book and put it back in circulation. So Marcus Bookstore is celebrating its 60th anniversary in October. So there's this interesting history of information and attempts made by the powers that be that to suppress certain information that would transform the consciousness of African people. If you don't know who you are, you don't know where you are. You don't know where you're going. So books such as Stolen Legacy by George G.M. James and They Came Before Columbus by Ivan Van Sertima, two books written by two sons of Guyana that Europeans have sought to suppress, because the information contained within that book takes us back to the Nile Valley, shows us the Nile Valley as an indigenous African creation that was usurped by Europeans who have covered up the fact that Egypt is in Africa, and ancient Egypt, or Kemet, is the oldest documented civilization known to mankind. So with that information being moved to the back burner, then others can continue to miseducate us. So that is a larger historical and cultural context for COINTELPRO, for the government's efforts to minimize people of African ancestry in the 1960s to attempt to reconnect with some memory of their ancestral homeland. So I'm from Chicago, brother. Born in 1951, came of age in the 1960s. I remember the Black Panther Party. I remember the Nation of Islam. I remember all the powerful and significant things that black folk were doing on the south side and the west side of Chicago. I remember COINTELPRO. I understand how the government took down the Black Panther Party. I remember when Fred Hampton was murdered. I was a freshman at the University of Illinois when Fred Hampton was murdered. I knew the sister who was in the house the night that he was murdered, the sister who supposedly fired the shotgun down this narrow corridor at police and missed the point-blank range. So I had an opportunity to listen to her tell her story and then to monitor the news as State's Attorney Edward Hanrahan gave the official Chicago Mayor Daley report of the Fred Hampton shooting. And their version of the shooting was entirely different to the history that we now know. We know that Fred Hampton was drugged and he was asleep. And these cops came in and shot him in his bed. That this was an effort to take him out of action so that this young, I think he was 21, 22 years old when he was murdered. So this brother would not raise the consciousness of other black people who were attempting to reprogram their thinking by aligning themselves with accurate historical and cultural information that would change their conceptual trajectory. So this whole COINTELPRO to suppress the Black Panther Party, COINTEL efforts to suppress the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam had its base in Chicago, and at one time, over 40% of the members of the Nation of Islam were government agents, were part of COINTELPRO. So this.
Wait, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Did you say what was that percentage again?
Over 40% of members of the Nation of Islam were working for the government or police departments. As a matter of fact, you remember when Malcolm X was assassinated. You remember the photograph of the brother who was giving Malcolm mouth-to-mouth resuscitation after he had been shot in the chest. He was a New York Police Department informant. This was Malcolm's bodyguard. He was an informant. So we've had this level of infiltration of our leadership and our organizations for, decades. We only know of COINTELPRO. There are other operations that have been going on that we will never know about that have been extremely successful. But the issue is, despite these efforts to put blinders on our consciousness and to keep us thinking and acting like niggas, like Negroes, there has been a groundswell of effort on the part of scholars like George G.M. James, like Ivan Van Sertima, like John Henry Clark, like Asa Hilliard, like so many others, like Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, like so many others who have been consistent in standing their historical and cultural ground and making sure that certain information was passed down from generation to generation. So I am blessed to have left Chicago in 1971. I transferred from the University of Illinois to Howard University because I was ready to leave Chicago. I was tired of being shot at. I was tired of being beat up by white folk for being in the wrong neighborhood. I was tired of being beaten up by black folk from being in the wrong neighborhood, and just wanted to go to another place where I can experience a different quality of life. And I found that in D.C. So I've been living in D.C. for 48 years. D.C. afforded me the opportunity to connect with conscientious black folk from all over the world who introduced me to knowledge and information that I never would have been exposed to had I stayed in Chicago. And as a result of that relationship, I am now doing things that I never imagined that I would be doing. So this transformation from the west side of Chicago to excavating tombs on the west bank of Luxor is part of my journey. And I can credit my success to having been in the presence of brothers and sisters who had their own network of knowledge, historical and knowledge transfer, and that I was honored and blessed to have personal relationships with a number of scholars, to have business relationships with these scholars, and they prepared me to do the work that I'm doing. So now at this point in my career, I'm passing it on. I have socialized my daughter. I have immersed her in this history and culture. We have a number of national programs in place right now where we're working with other young people and creating a pipeline of archaeologists, Egyptologists, historians, scholars, architects, engineers, so that we can replicate the work that we're doing and ensure that this information will thrive long after we're gone, so that despite the efforts of elements within the United States government, British intelligence, MI6, MI5, French intelligence, German intelligence, Spanish intelligence, to suppress the historical knowledge of African people, we are still moving forward. And we are in a position at this particular point in time in history where nothing that they have done will be able to stop what is in motion right now. So even though America appears to be going to hell, and it's a well-deserved journey to hell, there are opportunities available to people who are prepared, mentally, culturally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, to be able to right this ship when America goes down, so that we can take full advantage of the economic, social, and cultural things that we have inherited as a result of Africans in America being the wealthiest and best educated African people on the planet. And despite the dysfunction going on in our community, there are brothers and sisters and communities all throughout the United States who are doing good work. And we're in a position to ensure that the legacy that has been passed on to us will be managed and preserved such that it will be passed down to our descendants and will transform the consciousness of generations yet to be born.
I hope you guys are listening to this. If you just came in, I'm speaking with Professor Anthony Browder. Professor Browder is a very well-respected historian, Egyptologist, educational consultant. He also has written some books. I recommend you guys go take a look, and I remember the importance on this platform of us pushing you to support the things you believe in. Some of the books, I'll name a few, and maybe Dr. Browder can let me know if there's any books he wants you to know about. But the ones that I have in front of me are from the Browder File, 22 essays on the African American experience. I see from the Browder File, Survival Strategies for Africans in America, 13 Steps to Freedom. I love that. I see Avatar, a historical and cultural analysis, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. I see Africa on My Mind, My First Trip to Africa, just so much there. And so I want to ask you this, Dr. Browder. Everybody, please hit the thumbs up button. Also, please share this. We got to share the knowledge, push the message out there so everybody can hear it. So please take a moment. Don't just watch, just use your fingers, hit thumbs up, shares, all that stuff so that the algorithm will push the message out. So Dr. Browder, why do you think, I see one of your books is called My First Trip to Africa. Can you articulate why you believe, I assume you believe this, that it's important for all of us as African Americans to make a trip back to the motherland?
All right, well, Boyce, I don't believe that, because a belief is something you accept without proof. I know that travel back to the motherland is the best investment one can make in themselves and their family members. So my first trip to Africa was written 30 years ago by my daughter and I. It documents the trip that she made to Africa with me in 1989, when she was 7 years old. 1989 was when I wrote and published my first book, From the Browder File. So after she returned from her first trip to Egypt, 13 days in Egypt, we decided to sit down and have her write her first book. So writing that first book for my daughter, who was 8 years old at the time that book was published, was an extended homework assignment. And so she wrote the book from the perspective of a 7-year-old, talking about her experiences to Africa, talking about her first trip to Africa. So it documents what she saw, why she went there, and why was it so important for her to begin to travel to Africa to understand who she was as a person of African descent. So as I said, that book is 30 years old. We're in the process of revising that book now. We did another book with my daughter when she was 12 years old that documented her second trip to Africa. It's called Africa on My Mind. And on that second trip, we went to Ghana, Senegal, Gambia, and the Ivory Coast. We went to the west coast of Africa. We visited the various slave dungeons so that we can document and I can help my daughter understand how we got here so that she can understand the whole process of enslavement. And so these books are a byproduct of my assuming parental responsibility for my daughter, my most prized possession, my greatest investment. I've been a single parent since my daughter was 4 years old. And so I'm not going to allow a system, bless you, brother, I'm not going to allow a system that is vested in mentally and culturally disinvesting us. I'm not going to allow that system to teach my daughter who she is as a person of African ancestry. So I took her to Africa so that she can see for herself why Africa is important and why she, as a female of African descent, has an obligation and a responsibility to know who she is so that she can determine her quality of life based on her standing on the shoulders of her ancestors. So my daughter's she's been to Egypt, I think, 13 times, been to Africa probably a total of 20 times. And as you mentioned at the start of this program, we have been excavating 2 25th Dynasty tombs, 2 2,700-year-old tombs. We've been doing this work together, the two of us, for the past decade. We are the first father-daughter African-American archaeological team in history. She holds the distinction of being the first African-American in the burial chamber of Karakamin, this priest whose tomb we're excavating. So the idea was to work with my daughter to write and publish books about her experiences in Africa so that other children can learn about Africa through the eyes of one of their contemporaries. So her first book, as I said, is 30 years old. We are revising it now. Our books are being used in classrooms throughout the United States, the Caribbean, and Africa. And, it's a beautiful thing to be able to control your destiny and tell your story so that we can model for other people of African ancestry what we can do when we focus our attention on being the best human beings possible.
Well, I love it. I love it. You know, one of the principles, I don't know if I mentioned this to you when we were talking, but one of the principles we have here and in the Black Business School is that we believe in what we call the Black Core of Three, that Black people should educate our own children, create our own jobs, and support Black businesses. And so the education of your own children, I love what you were saying about educating your daughter to avoid all the terrible noise that's out here in terms of, you know, just I don't know what's worse, to be an uneducated Negro or a miseducated Negro. You know, it's scary either way. Let me ask you this. I want to ask you about, you mentioned slavery, and you know, the looming impact, the looming effect that it has over our society today that we still haven't fully addressed. Right now, they're having a reparations conversation in D.C. I'm sure you've been following a lot of this. What goes through your mind as you've watched that whole conversation about reparations for slavery taking place on Capitol Hill? Just what are your raw thoughts in terms of what you're seeing?
Sure. Well, as numerous people have said, slavery is America's first sin, America's original sin. And she has never atoned for that sin. Never. And given her current state of mind, she never will atone. So knowing the history of the people who created slavery, legalized slavery, America is not a democracy. It was established as a slaveocracy. America has become the wealthiest and most powerful nation on the face of the earth, not because she was blessed by God with her establishment in 1776, but because she was founded on the wholesale theft, sale, and enslavement of over 12 million people of African ancestry. That's a fact that America has yet to address, and I don't believe that she's willing to atone for. So to have a conversation about reparations is needed, but do I expect America to do that? No. But that doesn't mean I stop doing what I need to do, what I am compelled to do to repair myself. So I've been actively involved in the process of personal reparations, which is to repair my mind, to remember who I was, and restore all of the information that was illegal for people of African ancestry to possess. So the greatest weapon in the hands of our oppressor is our memory of who we were before we were oppressed. That's why George G.M. James was killed for writing Stolen Legacy. Ivan Van Sertima said that writing, they came before Columbus. And when he said they came before Columbus, he's talking about African people from the Nile Valley who built ships and navigated the Nile River and the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean between 1200 and 600 B.C. Africans had been to the Americas, primarily into Mexico and Central America, and brought their cargo of knowledge with them and jump-started architecture, government, civil and religious systems, which influenced indigenous people here in what we now call the Americas. That's part of our legacy. And so I don't expect this school system to teach us that information. I don't expect this government to acknowledge it, but I know that the information is there. I built my life and my career accessing what I refer to as forbidden information, processing that information, and then passing it on as intelligence to those with the greatest need to know, so that those who are willing to be engaged in the process of personal reparations repair your mind first, so that you can now think and act in such a manner that you can begin to free yourself from the clutches of America's slaveocracy consciousness. So in terms of educating yourself, creating your own businesses, I've been self-employed for 40 years. I was fortunate to figure out early in my career that as long as I was working for someone else, they would never pay me what I was worth. So I've developed my skills so that I could create my own businesses, work as hard as I wanted to, in order to generate the income to do what I wanted to do, to travel around the world, to go to conferences, to meet scholars, to buy books, to study, and then to travel to Africa, and then write my own books and produce curriculum so that I can raise the consciousness of others. This is my own form of personal reparations. So as I mentioned earlier, I took my daughter to Africa when she was 7. I assumed personal responsibility for teaching her her history and culture. So my daughter has been self-employed since she was 8 years old. Once she published her first book, She has traveled throughout the United States, traveled to Europe, speaking. So since my daughter was 8 years old, she's been making $200 an hour. So I'm teaching her that she doesn't have to go to school to learn how to get a job. I've taught her that she is a job. My daughter now works for me. She is now the program director for our Cultural Imperative program, which is a national program. She's developed a curriculum where we're now working we're in 20 cities. We'll be in 20 cities by the end of this year, where we have hundreds of high school students who meet once a month and who are reading my first book from the Browder file, having intelligent conversations about the information that they're learning and writing reflection papers so that they can now internalize what they have read and begin to see themselves with new eyes. So this is part of a larger program that we've been involved in, and this is my form of reparations. I'm not expecting the United States to do nothing for me that I can't do for myself. If they do happen to decide to give us some funds, then I know exactly what I'm going to do with that money, where I'm going to invest it. I've never bought a new car in my life. Don't need a new car, right? I'm about investing my money in people who look like me, investing my money in my projects so that I can expand what I'm doing and take it to the next level.
I love that a lot. And everybody who actually watches drboycetv.com, I want you guys to know last night, God sent me a message and I had to share it at 3 o'clock in the morning. And what I did was I put together what I consider to be your personal reparations plan. So I tell you, this is a reminder, man, that well, you know what, I feel so confirmed and validated when I talk to someone like you, an older brother, not a father figure, but an older brother figure, because you're not that old. You're younger and healthier than most people I know. But I love it when you say something and I think, oh my gosh, I was thinking the same thing. And I like the fact that you talk about us giving ourselves reparations. And so literally last night before this conversation happened, I said, you know, I think I have the basics of a personal reparations plan. It was more financially oriented, but I literally listed 5 things that your family can do right now that will make sure that you and your family are good in a generation or less. Those 5 things, or even on a basic level, you and your family will be good. Just go to drboycetv.com. The videos, maybe 3 or 4 videos down, but just all you got to do is type in Boyce Watkins reparations and look for videos I've made in the last couple of days. You can filter by that and you can find it there as well. So you remember, reparations, the best reparations are the ones that are homemade. Reparations are best homemade.
Exactly.
We're waiting on your oppressor to make you to make you well. That's actually a scary concept, actually.
Yeah, it ain't gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. If you know anything at all about American history, America would never give black people anything that would be of value to black folk. If they give you something, it's going to be more beneficial to white folk in the long run. So that's just American history 101.
Yep, that's right. That's right. History tells us everything we need to know, and that's why people like yourself are so important. Because so many of us just don't know history. Not even just black people. I mean, even some white folks, if they knew history, they wouldn't behave the way they behave. I bet the majority of the people who love Fox News don't know history. They don't know what America has done to black and brown people all over the globe. So they walk around with this American exceptionalism and these false ideas of what it means to be a good person, and it's ridiculous. But I want to ask you, speaking of history, let me ask you this: you mentioned yourself as a person who has access to secrets, who's finding information that the rest of us don't have, and you are, in my opinion, the world's leading expert on Egypt. You might not consider yourself to be number one, but in my mind, you're number one. There's nobody else. So can you give us maybe a 2 or 3 fast facts we can walk away with that we should know about Egypt's role in shaping society around the world and things that we were never taught in school?
Sure. Well, first of all, most of what we know about Egypt is wrong. Most of what we know about Egypt has been given to us by conquerors of Egypt. First of all, Egypt is in Africa. Egypt is in Northeast Africa. It's part of the African continent. Egypt is a Greek name. Pyramid is a Greek name. Sphinx is a Greek name. So most of the names of ancient Egyptian people, places, and things have been named by non-African people. So our first order of duty is to recover the original African names of African people, places, and things. And once you do that, it changes everything. So the original name of the country is Kemet, not Egypt. Kemet is a word that means the nation of the black people, not the black soil, as National Geographic or the Discovery Channel would tell us, but the way that that word is written with the determinatives of a person means the land of the black people and not the black land. So Kemet is the oldest documented civilization known to mankind. So as Lynn Jeffries often said, whoever controls the history of Kemet controls the history of the world. So we have examples of government. The first system of government known to mankind was developed in Kemet. The first system of architecture, the oldest building ever created, is still standing in Africa today. It's the Step Pyramid designed by Imhotep, the world's first multi-genius. The first civil servants, if you will. The first physicians in history, the first dentists in history, the first gynecologists, the first engineers, the first hydrologists, the first social scientists, the first psychologists. All of this developed first in the Nile Valley. And Kemet is nothing but an extension of cultures and civilization that developed further up south. The Nile River flows from the south to the north, right? So following the progression of the Nile River, the culture flowed. The Nile River is a cultural highway. So the culture flowed out of Ethiopia via the Blue Nile into Sudan, or what was known originally as Kush. Those civilizations are older than Kemet. They're older than Kemet, but white folk never talk about that. James Reisner, who was the director of the taught history at Harvard and at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. Reisner was the foremost authority on excavations in Kush, and there are over 500 pyramids in Kush. There's 118 in Egypt. There are more pyramids in Kush than there are in Egypt, and so we know based on documentation that the hieroglyphics is a Greek word. Medu Neter is the original African term for that writing form. Systems of kingship and government and the so-called gods of Egypt, they originated from Kush, further south, Kush and Ethiopia, right? So all of this information tells a story of African people before there was civilization in Europe, thousands of years before there was civilization in Europe. So by the time Greece came on the scene around 850 BC, Kemet was already 3,000 years old. Mm. The people of Kemet had libraries, had great temples, had built pyramids and monuments that the world today cannot replicate. Rome came into existence around 750. So the essence of European/American history and culture is rooted in Greco-Roman history and culture, which was established at least 3,000 years after African history and culture. Let me give you something else, put some things in context. There's, at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, there's an exhibit that talks about the origins of mankind. And in this exhibit, it says that Africans have lived on this planet for at least 300,000 years. Humanity began in Africa. 300,000 years ago, the first Homo sapiens sapiens lived in Africa alone, in East Africa, near Kenya and Ethiopia. And that beginning around 60,000 years ago, a group of Africans walked east out of Africa and populated Asia and ultimately populated the world. And then approximately 30,000 years ago, another group of these same Africans walked west into Europe and populated Europe. So if you just process those two bits of information, the first people in Asia and the Americans were not Asians or Americans, they were Africans who had migrated to those land masses over periods of tens of thousands of years. The first people in Europe were not white folk, they were Africans. And based on genetic research that was done just recently, just within the past 4 years, geneticists have determined when those Africans who have been in Europe for at least let's say 34,000 years, when those Africans lost their melanin and mutated and became people now classified as Caucasian, that mutation occurred 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. Right? Now just process that. If Africans have been on the planet as Homo sapiens sapiens, man with a consciousness and with the consciousness that they have consciousness, that's Homo sapiens sapiens. We possess this ability for 300,000 years. Europeans have only been on the planet 7,000 to 8,000 years, which means at the least we have a 292,000 year head start on white folk. That's a fact. So when you know that, and when you look at our historical record, which exists, that's the stolen legacy. That's the narrative of those people who came before Columbus. That is what is not taught in school systems. And that is what we have the capacity to learn now just by doing what our great-great-great-grandparents were not allowed to do, that is, read and write. All of this information has been written down somewhere. It's in libraries. It's in books. And if you cultivate a love affair with reading, you can begin to access information that your oppressor will never expose you to. As a matter of fact, it's not your oppressor's job to mentally free you, to educate you. That's not their job. That's our responsibility. And when we know who we are, what we do is every person has an obligation to know yourself, to know your history, to know your ancestry, to know the best and the worst of your people so that you know what to do and, more importantly, you know what not to do. And with that knowledge, you can live and function successfully in a racially charged environment, in a hateful environment. You know, America is probably more hate-filled now than it has been at any point in time in our lives, brother. But despite all the hatred, I can still navigate in America because I know who I am. I know what to do to protect myself. You mentioned, you know, when you saw Brother Nuri and I on the plane, you were worried. I'm not worried about that because I understand how the universe works. I understand how ancestors will plug into people who are doing good work and how they will protect you. They will make sure that your vessel is protected, is healthy, so that you can continue to do the work so that they can express themselves to you. So that's a reality that your oppressor will never teach you about. Your oppressor nor your oppressor's religions will ever teach you the truth about who you are as a person and what your relationship is with the creative source, which some people call God, others call Allah, others call Jehovah. All of these concepts sprang from the minds of African people first, who've had a longer relationship with the creative force than any other people on the planet, who know these ancestors better than anybody on the planet. So when we know ourselves, when we're comfortable with ourselves and allow ourselves to be the vessels to which these ancestors will speak and do their best work, there is nothing that you can't do. That's how the universe functions.
Wow. Are you guys blown away to where I am? If you are, say something in the chat. I see Dr. Browder. Everybody loves this conversation. You had a tough act to follow, man. We had a really cool guy yesterday, Michael V. Roberts. He's actually a black billionaire. And,
I know Mike. Mike went to Egypt with us 2 years ago. I know Mike.
Yeah. Michael did a great job, man. And I'm gonna tell you, when we got warriors like you guys on our side, you know, I don't think we can lose. I do not think we can lose. They don't know, the adversaries don't know what's coming at them. So, and I don't want them to know until it's too late. I'm gonna let you get the last word, but I want to make sure everybody knows I'm speaking with Professor Anthony Browder. He is a renowned Egyptologist and historian. He's written several books, including From the Browder Files, essays on, let's see, I had the title here, essays on
22 essays on the African American experience.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
it.
And let me ask you this, Dr. Browder, what is your, do you have a main website people can go to if they want to support you?
Yeah, of course. Our primary website is ikg-info.com, ikg-info.com. If you go to that website, you'll see a page for all of our publications, DVDs. You'll see information on our excavation, which is the Asa Restoration Project, named in honor of A.C.G. Hilliard, who passed 11 years ago, this past Tuesday. You'll see information about our Cultural Imperative Program. It is a national program where we're creating Saturday academies for high school students to bring this information to them in a controlled environment. We also have our Egypt on the Potomac field trips, which are conducted the first Saturday of each month, where we show people, we take you around the city, and we show you that the founding fathers of America incorporated African historical, cultural, philosophical, and spiritual traditions into creating what is now the wealthiest, most powerful nation in human history. So all of those details are on our website. You'll see a link to support our Asa Restoration Project, our fundraising efforts. And I'm getting ready to head back to Egypt on Tuesday. We are installing our second exhibit in the Luxor Museum. It's going to be a grand exhibit that will showcase the 14 years of excavations in South Asasif, where we are excavating and restoring two 25th Dynasty tombs. We have a huge grand showcase that we will be installing in the Luxor Museum on September the 8th. We will have at that event the Minister of Antiquities, other high government officials, a host of other Egyptologists who will come to see the work that we've done, and we're going to cap off that evening with a grand dinner and reception on the grounds of Luxor Temple, one of the largest temples in Egypt. And then we've got some other things that we're working on. So we're finishing up another excavation season. We've got some incredible discoveries that we made this season that I'm not at liberty to discuss right now, but by this time next month, when I return from Egypt, I'll be able to share that information. We have to wait until after we've completed the season and filed a report with the Department of Antiquities. Then we can begin to discuss publicly what we've done. But we've made some incredible discoveries. We're excavating and restoring two 2,700-year-old tombs. 2,700-year-old tombs, brother. So in these tombs, now to give you a slight example, the primary tomb that we're excavating and restoring is the tomb of a priest by the name of Karakamen. He was a priest who worked at Karnak Temple, or Ipet-Isut, which is the largest temple complex in the world. It's larger than the Vatican. You could take every church built in London and put them inside of Karnak and still have room for 2 football fields. This one temple complex had over 83,000 men and women, African men and women, working in this temple complex. So this is part of the legacy that we are documenting, that we are restoring, and so we're preparing for the grand opening of these 2 tombs in 2023, September 2023. So by the end of this year, we'll have all of our ducks in a row. We'll begin to start promoting and advertising our 2023 grand opening, and of course we'll let you know so that you can get the word out, and we will forever change people's perception of Kemet, of Egypt, of the Nile Valley, and the role that African people have played as the mothers and fathers of culture and civilization.
Wow. Well, I can't wait for that. And yes, absolutely. I volunteer myself as a partner in helping to share the knowledge and get the word out. And so I'm so happy we got a chance to talk. I think it was a great act of God to bring us together on that airplane and give us a chance to talk anyway. It's funny how that works, because I'd heard about you and I always respected you. I just never had a chance to talk to you. And so I hope you all will take a second and give Dr. Browder a digital round of applause. Just give him a thank you in the chat. Please say something. Also, please share this conversation. Everybody on the African History Network, hello. Please share this discussion. Also on drboycetv.com. Please hit the thumbs up, share button, subscribe button, everything else, because we know knowledge is power, but we're fighting against the weight of ignorance that is being pushed in the community. So we just got to push back. That's how you win. So just a reminder, I want to give you guys the website one more time in case you want to go support Dr. Browder. I highly recommend going there, getting some books for your children. It's ikg-info.com. That's ikg-info.com. Also, a quick reminder to those of you who want to come out, I'll be in Atlanta the weekend of August 23rd. I'm going to give we're going to do a book signing meet and greet on Friday. I'll be speaking at the We Buy Black convention Saturday, and I'll do a day-long, 7.5 hour long investment seminar on Sunday. If you'd like to join us, please visit drboyceatlanta.com. That's drboyceatlanta.com. And then also, you guys know in September, we have the All Black National Convention, which is in Houston, weekend of September 27th. So to learn more, please visit allblacknationalconvention.com. So if you like being black and that's fun for you, then you're going to have a great time at this convention. And so I want to say thank you so much, brother, for your time, man. It was an honor and a pleasure to have you.
It's my pleasure as well. I appreciate the work that you're doing to bring historical, cultural, and financial consciousness to our folks. And people are listening. They are following you, and we are changing our relationship with ourselves. We're changing our relationship with America, and we are changing our relationship with the world, and that is what time it is.
Yes, it is. All right. Everybody know what time it is? Good.
All right.
Don't know now, you know. Well, thanks a lot, Dr. Browder. Please have a safe trip to Egypt, and we look forward to having you back at your convenience.
All right. Thank you, sir. Have a great weekend.
All right, you
too.
too.
Right, peace.
Peace.